Well, welcome back to our deep dive into PMBOK 5th edition. This module we're going to talk about controlling project costs now that we have set our cost baseline. Now before we get into that, I want to just refresh on one thing. I'm going to show a slide here that we saw in our last module. I want to be clear about this. I may have not been clear when I stated this. Perhaps I even misstated it, but let's make sure we all understand. See the cost baseline here, which we should know by now are the total aggregate costs of all the cost activities, all the work that roll into your work packages, and then you have a contingency reserve for known unknowns in there, and those equate up to the total of your control accounts, and those then are baselined here into your cost baseline, and on top of that is your management reserves that are not part of your official cost baseline, but the cost baseline, your official baseline, your project there, plus your management reserve, those are identified by PMBOK as the project budget. So it's up there, but it's this nebulous number that you don't have control over because it's not baseline there, so management may take this. So just to make clear, if you think I said, maybe I did, that the cost baseline is equal to the project baseline, that's not truly the case. So let's be clear that the cost baseline plus that management reserve is the project budget. So if in fact management takes that money away from you, then and only then will the actual cost baseline equal the project budget. So just to make that clear, and just to reinforce the fact, which should have been clear anyway here, is that the cost baseline is your performance management baseline that we do our forecasting against. We don't forecast against management reserves. So let's make sure that's clear. Okay, if not, listen to this again, but we're all good with that now, so let's move on. So here's our controlling costs. Now that we have our budget, which would then actually include the management reserve, what are we going to do about it? Coming in is our the main ones. Here's our work processes. Now the data is coming in, the actual expenditures. We're actually spending money. We're conducting our activities. We're executing them. Therefore, we're expending money. Third-party goods are coming in. We have to pay our vendors and suppliers or subcontractors or whatever it might be. That's all coming in now, and we're going to look at all that compared to our budget and do some magic with earned value management to determine whether we're on track or not. On top of that, here come our project funding requirements from our determined budget up here, because we need to reconcile that against the actual expenditures now. It could be such that a large item in our activity was done way in advance for some reason, and it's very expensive, but now we may not have the money for it, so we need to know these things. We've got to watch out for them with the funding requirements. And the outputs are work performance information, but the big one is cost forecasts and then accompanying change requests that may be issued to compensate for deviations to get us back in line with the project budget. Oh, by the way, just one more time, to reinforce this idea that, you're going to need to know one way or another for your PMP exam where all of these processes fall within the process groups. So remember, developing and planning obviously are planning. Here's executing right here, because we're doing the work, 4.3 executing. Over here, what are we doing? Monitoring and controlling. Obviously with monitor and control the work, but perform integrated change control is a monitor and control item too. So there it is there. You're going to need to know these for all your process groups, for all your activities across all knowledge areas. You never know what they're going to ask. So, and it's not really that difficult once you start really reviewing these things and understanding what these activities do by their name. And you don't want to be missing questions on the exam just because you haven't paid real attention to understanding what process groups all these things fall in. So just another word of caution to you where you can easily get more questions correct if you just pay a little more attention to these things. So the objective of controlling costs is just what it sounds like, control the cost, control to our budget now. We monitor the project status. We recognize that there are variances, and we actually can see them now because actuals are coming in. We need to take corrective action, and we have to minimize risks because of the way we're spending and expending our money. We do updates to project costs because of actuals, and we're going to be managing that to the cost baseline and taking corrective actions. What else might the project cost control cover? Okay, cost control is also concerned with, and we talked about this some time ago, timely change request processing, because changes will affect what? Something of your triple constraint. And in our context here, it may possibly affect cost. So timeliness and getting a jump and making sure our numbers and our projections, our estimates are correct right away is a big deal. We need to make sure we do that. If cost overruns, we can detect that over time with our earned value management that we'll see. But if you know right away, that something should cost $50 and all of a sudden it's $300 or why it's a cost overrun, get on it right away, take some corrective actions to prevent it in the future if possible. But then at least you need to deal with this somehow, this overrun. And of course, stakeholder communication through this whole thing, because they're, they're very attuned and interested in the expenditures, because it's, their paycheck too. They have a vested interest in the company, and they need to keep up stakeholder value, not them as a stakeholder, but stockholder value in your company. If you're a public company, for example, they're stewards of your money, and they're going to be interested in knowing what's going on. So communication with them is vital. Okay, so our inputs, the PM plan. Well, what elements of the plan will help us control costs? Well, obviously the cost baseline and the parameters that are in the cost management plan. Project funding requirements, we should know now, are extremely critical because that is the pot of money we have available at any point in time to meet the commitments that we've expended by conducting the activity and producing our deliverables. So projected expenditure, anticipated liabilities, and that could actually be money that we may need at a certain point for compensate for risk that may happen at a certain. You may know a risk may be most likely to happen at a certain point in time because of what you're doing. So maybe that's an anticipated liability. One of those things too. Work performance data. Now all the work performance data comes out of executing the work out of 4.3. So that's your project progress and your authorized costs. And why are they authorized? Because they're in your cost baseline associated with each activity in your network diagram. So the costs that are incurred, the actual costs that are there as you progress through the project, that's work performance data that's pumped in, so you can start looking at that, making sure you're on track with your schedule, and then doing some earned value magic later. Organizational process assets. We've seen this before, and here they are again. Obviously, we control costs according to policies. If they're there, we have to conform with them in the organization. Procedures, guidelines, also what monitoring and control methods are available to us that the organization may recommend to us. Whatever's there, comes in and it helps us control costs and wash through the tools and techniques here, in particular, earned value management. Now, we're going to spend some time on this in a minute, but let me just look at here again. Here's earned value management. Then we're going to talk about forecasting, which is a natural fallout of earned value management. And another key performance indicator is the two complete performance index, which again is a component and fallout of earned value management. So these first three here all have to do very specifically with earned value management. And then we do some performance reviews and a few other things and tools and techniques before we finally end up either producing some performance information, cost forecasting, and then some change requests if we need to make corrective or preventative action. So we're going to come back here and we're going to talk about a little scenario that would perhaps help you better understand earned value management if in fact this is the first time you've seen this term, or you may have heard about it but you've never really worked with it or maybe don't understand it. So we'll help you get over that when we come back. Okay, so here we are now. We're going to talk about earned value management. We're going to have a little prelude to it, and then we're going to show you a little scenario, spend some time on that so you can understand how this works dynamically. So, earned value management. Three key dimensions for each work package or control account. You don't do it at the individual work item level. You use it in the aggregated either work package to forecast how you're doing with the subcomponents of deliverables, or at the actual deliverable level of your control accounts. And of course, you may have many deliverables, many different control accounts that you work with. Now here's the terms we use. We have a planned value, PV, and again in your PMP exam they may use just PV, or they may say planned value, or both. So you need to know what they are regardless of which way they use them. PV, that the plan value is your network schedule diagram where you've planned, you have costs, and because of the nature of the way it's timed out and sequenced, you know when you should be expending certain funding. That's your plan value. Earned value means that as you're going along in a time-wise fashion, actually executing these tasks, you are spending, in essence, spending that money, that cost. You're spending the cost, and you may spend it earlier in time than you were allotted to do, or you may take longer to complete that task, therefore stretch out the cost that you are expending over time, and that is earned value. At any point in time, did you actually expend that cost in the time allotted, or did it take you longer or shorter than that time? That concept is called earned value. And of course the actual cost is what you actually spent at any point in time. So these three components are used in earned value management, as we'll see, to do some really serious and good forecasting as to how your project is performing. This is all about project performance. So you're going to monitor the approved baseline. You're going to monitor variances from the approved baseline. And to do that, here's another one. We've seen these two before. We've mentioned these. Schedule variance, how off are you from where you should be in the schedule, and how off are you from the costing that should have been expended at any point in time. We're going to work with those. Earned value management provides both efficiency, how efficient are you in using your resources and spending the money and in doing the job within the time allotted, and then and indicators to forecast how you are doing going to do up to this point and then into the future. So that's called Schedule Performance Index, Cost Performance Index, and kind of a special one is a To Complete Performance Index. With all things being equal, as of any point in time, you can estimate where am I going to be at the end. To Complete Performance Index. And because of these, you can then make more intelligent adjustments to your project execution. So, earned value management integrates your triple constraint of cost, scope, and schedule baselines. And they do that to create what we've heard before, your performance measurement baseline, or your PMB. Again, it could be the abbreviation, it could be the full word, you don't know, but either way, it's your performance measurement baseline. And you use this PMB, remember, which is it equates at this point to your cost baseline itself, to measure value of project performance and project against actual deliverables that you produce, actual cost incurred, and actual work expended. Because you expend work, that's where you get your cost incurred, and because you have work expended, then you're producing deliverables. Now, you may not do it exactly according to your network schedule, and that's where you get your variances in earned value, as we'll see, and we take it from there to come up with our forecast to see, well, maybe it's okay, we didn't meet that, but we're still within tolerances of our thresholds before we have to take action in our forecasts. So you got to monitor that, because we're in monitoring and controlling process group, right? We're in controlling costs, so you can monitor that and then control it if you need to. So that's the fundamental reason and basis and concept of earned value management. So you got these key dimensions. Let's go over those once more. And there's something new here too. We've seen before BAC, and we'll get to that in a second and review that. But your key dimensions are your planned value. That's the scheduled work. The value of the scheduled and budgeted work is your planned value. Earned value is the dollar amount of the work you have expended to date relative to the budgeted work. Okay, and just as a matter of fact, your earned value can never exceed your planned value. Because eventually you're going to do all your planned value, so your earned value would equal that at the end. The point is, in the interim, your earned value may be more or less than your planned value at that point, at some point in time other than the end. And of course, now we have actual costs expended to perform that work, another dimension of earned value management. And with that kind of cost, there is no upper limit. You may just go out of sight with your cost, because you want to keep that under control before that happens. But the point is, actual cost, if you get a question like this on a PMP exam, does actual cost have an upper limit, some sort of question like that? Well, no, you spend what you spend unless somebody stops you. Now, in addition to that, we have this other concept of balance at completion. You remember our funding curve, so eventually you're going to be at the end, and that is your balance at completion. Okay, that's the project cost baseline. The total of all your expenditures is the budget at completion. So we're going to take some time and go over this little scenario, and maybe it'll make it a little bit clearer, I hope it does, on how earned value management works. So we'll come back to this, spend a little time on this in a minute. Okay, so here we are at our earned value management scenario. Let's take a few minutes and actually go through this in detail, and we'll try to walk through this to help you get an idea of how earned value management works. And as we go through here, don't really be concerned. Don't be trying to figure out calculations and reasoning. We're not trying to pick this apart in that regard. It's the concept of how earned management works that we're really trying to look at. So let's just try to get through this in that light. So you're contracted to erect 4 walls as part of a storage shed. You're scheduled to complete the work in 4 days, and you have a budget of $250 a wall, or a total budget of $1,000. And here we have day 1, 2, 3, and 4 here. And by the way, we're at the end of day 3 in this scenario. So the work for day 1 went as planned. Here we are, progress 100%. We spent $250, which was our budget. We started and finished the first wall, so we're good there. Went as planned. However, on day 2, we only finished half of the wall. Why? Because on day 2, early in the morning, somebody stole some of our tools off the job site, and we had to replace them, take time off, and go get replacements. So now we're behind schedule. And in fact, because we had to replace some tools, we had available quickly, so we had to spend $50 more than our planned budget to do that, in addition to delaying the work to finish wall 2 into day 3 right there. So my cost baseline, we didn't have any foresight, and we didn't have any management reserve for this unknown unknown, nor did we have a known unknown, a risk that maybe somebody will steal our tools, or have a delay of some reason because we don't have the right materials. We didn't have it in our budget, so we're done with that. We can't rely on that money. So in essence, we have a $50 pure cost overrun at this point. So here we are at the end of day 2. It says 100% done, but that's because we completed it in day 3, therefore wall number 2 was done, but we did it in day 3. However, we spent $300 instead of $250. Okay, so the graph below down here depicts day 3 ending. When we're done with day 3, we've only finished half of that wall because we spent time finishing the wall from the day before, and we did not spend all of our money here. See, we completed wall 2, but only half of wall 3, and although our expenditures for the material were planned for that day, so 250. Oh, that's right. We spent 300 on day 2 because we had to spend more for the tools, but we did actually spend what we needed to spend on day 3, but we're only half done with the wall. So that's where we are right now. So we started trying to do progress on day 4, and we aren't in day 4 yet. So where are we from an earned value point of view? Day 3, end of day 3 status. Our planned value, according to our budget of $1,000, here's $250 a day, as you can see, for a total of $1,000. And these are gray over here because we've not done anything with day 4 yet. Our actual cost was good, $250 for the first day, but we spent $50 more that we're charging against the project to recover our tools because we've had no management reserve to cover this, or contingency reserve. So we spent $300 actual cost on day 2, and we did spend $250 per budget on day 3, but primarily because part of that was allocated to the completion of the budget or the wall on day 2 that we didn't get finished, and part of the wall on day 3. So we spent all our money here on day 3 for that day 3. But up here again, remember, we're only 50% done with that wall. So here's a calculation that we're going to need, not directly in this scenario right here, but in detail. We'll need that later on in the slides coming up. But first, the balance at completion, which is $1,000, minus the actual cost of $250, or actually right here, actual cost right there, is $750. So our balance at completion here, and you just calculate that out, and you'll find that at the end we have yet $250 remaining in the budget. And why? Because we spent $50 more than we needed. So we're short $50 basically on day 4. Now our earned value is against the work that we should have done. So here's $250 we spent, and we actually accomplished $250 worth of work. We earned that value. Here we have $250 because we did, now we're at the end of day 3, so we did complete the wall that we should have done in day 2. So actually our earned value for that wall, that component, that activity, was $250, so we're good there. Now here we're only 50% done with the wall, so we've actually had an earned value of only $125, or half of that. Okay. And the same thing, balance at completion minus the earned value, so 1,000 minus the 250 is 750. And if you do the same, go right on down the line, we'll find that on day 3 now, instead of having to accomplish $250 worth of work, we have to do more work for the same budget of $1,000. We have to do $375 worth of work for $250 worth of compensation. Okay, you see how we're out of whack here, so we have to expend more effort for more money to accomplish what we were given to do. So that's that calculation. And by the way, over here now, here's our actual cost. You add these up, across here, $800 right here at the end of day 3. You add up all your earned value at the end of day 3, $625. You add up all the where is it? Planned value up here, of course, is your $750 that we've spent to date. No, that we should have spent planned value at the end of day 3. So we know our actual cost at the end of day 3. We know our earned value at the end of day 3 and our planned value. So you can see we're out of whack here. We had a planned value. We've not provided that value fully at the end of day 3, and we spent $800 actual cost against a budget of $1,000, where actually it should have been $750. So these are the numbers, and these are the ways you would determine these components of earned value management. And of course, we know balance at completion is $1,000. That's our budget. Now, the CPI, SPI, and TCPI are calculations that we will make that help us determine our forecasting and whether we're way out of control, a little bit out of control, and whether it's egregious enough that we have to actually re-baseline our project. So we'll see exactly how to calculate these metrics here on the following slides, but let's assume we all know how to do that right now. So the answers are, now here's how this works. Our cost performance index for day 1, since we spent what we were planning to spend, we have a metric of 1. That means we're right on target with costs. SPI, our schedule, we're supposed to build the wall 1, we completed wall 1. Again, regardless of what it costs, we completed wall 1. So our schedule performance index is 1. That's good. That means our time was exactly what it should have been according to the plan. And at this point in time, we think we're golden. Well, we're great. We're right on target. There's no reason for us to believe that we're not going to be able to complete the other 3 walls in the same manner. So we have a to complete cost performance index of 1. You say, we're going to spend $250 a day, we're going to be good. Well, something happened here on day 2 had a delay in schedule, and we had an overrun in cost. So as you can see, even though we completed because we completed wall 2 on day 3, from day 2 standpoint, that work is completed. So from a schedule point of view, we completed the wall on day 2, and we're still on schedule because we should have completed it. We completed it late, but it's completed, so it's a 1. Our cost, though, since we had a cost overrun, now we're trending down, and actually in the real world, a 0.91 would be a very bad thing. That's a big number. Actually here it's like, many percent overrun. But anyway, 0.91 is a bad number, and it shows it right here. And therefore, if this trend, now we're going to see this gets a little dicey and maybe difficult to comprehend, but there are many ways of looking at where you're going to be at the end of the job. So your to complete performance index, assuming you continue on the same trend and you don't make other corrections, we're going to be over our cost quite a bit. 1.1, we're trending up, so we got to watch out for that. On the end of day 3, where we are now, because we haven't recovered any money that we spent extra and so on, and we have not yet completed day 3's wall, we're in even more dire shape here with our costs. We're at 0.78 factor. Our to complete now is going way out of whack. What this means is it may cost, if we keep this up, it may cost almost twice basically, what we planned on. And the schedule now is out of whack because we haven't completed day 3. So going into day 4, here's our metrics, which is the same as over here. So that's kind of the dynamics and the concept that's involved with calculating earned value management. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take some time and look at the actual calculations, and these are not just plug these numbers into a formula and you have it. There are a number of significant variations and choices that you're going to have depending on the nature of your project and your risk-taking abilities to forecast where you're going to be in the future. So we're going to look at those now in a minute. Okay, so now that we've seen our little scenario to give you an idea of the dynamics of earned value management and some of the basic metrics that could come out of those, like your CPI, SPI, and TCPI, which I've carried over, by the way, here on this slide, because we're going to use these numbers in these examples. We're going to look at the actual calculations. Don't be misled here. This first slide is very easy. The others will become a little more complex. But you're really going to need to know these. This is probably one of the most difficult activities, 7.4 in PMBOK, that you need to know formulas for. In fact, it's probably the only one that has some really significant formulas compared to your 3-point estimation, which is a simple weighted and average stuff. But this is more difficult, but you're going to need to know these because you are going to have some questions on the PMP exam without a doubt on your understanding and grasp of these concepts. So you need to know this whether you use earned value management or not in your project. If you want to get a leg up, get more questions right, you're going to want to understand these and figure out how to apply your formulas to them. So the simple ones are, these are your approved baseline. It's always against your approved baseline, whether it's schedule or cost. And in this instance, it's schedule. Schedule variance, SV, is a measure of your schedule performance, the raw data. So your schedule performance is your earned value where you actually are, what you've actually contributed toward completing your schedule, minus the planned value is your schedule variance. So from the wall building example above, again, we're at the end of day 3, we've earned $625 worth of value in our schedule. We've not completed wall 3, therefore our planned schedule is 750, so we are minus 75 behind. Now don't worry about whether this is days or hours or money or time. It's just a raw number because it's just a metric. It's a comparison against a baseline metric. So we're just minus 75 in schedule value, and we just call that behind schedule. If it's minus, we're behind where we should have been with the work that we accomplished at that point. Very similarly with cost, your CV, your cost variance, it's the budget deficit or surplus if you've actually accomplished something in less money than planned at any point in time. So it's your cost variance is your earned value down here, 625, again, same thing as earned value, minus the $800 that we spent instead of what we should have spent. So we have a cost overrun of 175. In this case, yeah, it's dollars. Okay, very simple right here. They say if they give you some kind of scenario with what these metrics over here, they're going to probably give you AC, EV, PV, BAC, and they actually may give you the metric CPI, and you have to go backwards and figure out what the earned value is. It could be these things. Formulas work both ways. That's why you have to understand, how to use them. But anyway, we're behind schedule and we have a cost overrun. So now, some efficiency indicators. And again, let me go back. These are variances, just raw variances against a known baseline. Now, we're going to do some efficiency indicators, which are like percentile. You're 5% this, 50% that. Those are efficiency kind of things. So The project team, which in this case may be just you building this wall, the SPI, the formula is the earned value divided by the planned value, EV over PV. So if you put in the numbers down here that we know already, it's 625 divided by 750, or now you have a schedule performance index of minus 0.83. Now the way to characterize this in language says that for every $1 of work that was scheduled for us, we only contributed 83 cents worth of work that was accomplished. So that's where that comes from. Now we're talking schedule, we're talking 83 cents. That's why I say don't be concerned with the answer to these things, whether it's dollars or cents, but in the context of what it is, you can then say that for every dollar worked, we only contributed 83 cents worth of work. So now we're 0.83, and not a good thing. We're less than 1. That means we're going to have to do more work for the same amount of money we should have done earlier. Now here's our cost performance index, very similar, budgeted resource efficiency, and this right here, CPI, is considered the most critical earned value management metric of all of them, not to belittle any of the others, but in the real world, in organizations that really base their project management performance success on earned value, this is a very, very key metric to them. So, and you know, cost means if you're not just spending too much, it just means, you know, you're not accomplishing a lot of things you should have. But anyway, it's very similar. It's your earned value over your actual cost. Up here is earned value over the planned value of your schedule. Here it's earned value over the actual cost. So you calculate that out, 0.78. Now don't say 78 cents here, just say 0.78. But if you want to translate that into management talk, you'd say, boy, for every dollar we spent, we only got 78% worth of completed work value. That's what that's saying. And over here, here's our metrics that we just talked about over here. Okay, that's fairly easy to comprehend, fairly easy to calculate, obviously, right here. Well, now things are going to get a little dicey, and we're going to come back and give you a breather, let that absorb in you, and then we're going to come back and talk about forecasting. Okay, so here we are now at forecasting. We've gotten our raw variance calculations for schedule and cost. Now we're going to talk about using those to our advantage to forecast, you know, how we're headed into the future if we don't do anything about it. Now here's something that again might be confusing, so I'm going to show you this slide again, or I'm going to superimpose something we saw earlier. Here it is here. This was just happened to be our funding requirements, and that in itself, funding requirements is irrelevant right now. But the point here is, look over here on that slide earlier, this was on there, the balance at completion. Now they're calling this the budget in PMBOK, whereas earlier we said, you know, make sure that the project budget, quote unquote, includes the management reserve, where right under the line that is your cost baseline under here, which actually is what it says, cost baseline. But here in earned value, they're calling the balance at completion the budget. So it's a little confusing, but if you're talking earned value management, the budget doesn't include any management reserves in earned value sense. Okay, nothing's easy necessarily, but as long as you understand that, you won't get confused. I personally don't think that in a PMP exam they're going to try and trick you of whether budget at completion includes management reserve or not, but they may. So just understand that these are these two subtle differences when you're talking about project cost baselines and your performance measurement baseline, which is that plus the management reserve is your project budget, where here they're just saying the budget is the budget at completion, which doesn't include the management reserve, which was right on their graph there. So given that, let's look at forecasting. So here are some more calculations. So here's, and I mentioned all that so you understand the differences when they're talking about budget at completion and budget and so on. But here we are, BAC now. So the budget at completion is the total allocated budget, and this is used to compute various estimates at completion. See, now we're forecasting. We want to make, what's the estimate at completion that we're going to be at? So that's the official term, estimate at completion, EAC. Now, estimate at completion is different than the estimate to complete down here, ETC. See, now it's getting a little hazy here, so let's try and clarify this. So your estimate at completion, this is when your balance at completion is still deemed to be acceptably achievable. Okay, I have an estimate at completion. I still think I can make it, but if things get way out of whack, you're going to be switch horses, and you're going to start talking about, well, okay, my estimate at completion, I know I can't do, so now what is my estimate to complete, basically? So you're going to take a different tack, and when you do that down here, you may have to actually re-estimate all your remaining costs, and it may even require a re-baseline of your costing or schedule. So two different approaches, two different concepts, but they're all earned value management-based forecasting constructs. So let's look at each one individually. And then it becomes even more fun after this for a slide, but let's look at this. So your all things equal, let's look at our little scenario again. We're not in that, at this moment anyway, worried about rebaselining, although we may after we do all these calculations. Estimate at completion, this is when you still feel you can meet your budget at completion, still achievable. So you have options here, options to calculate the budget, the estimate at completion. Okay, you can do it, you can say, my estimate at completion at the budgeted rate, at the rate we're doing right now, that's your current actual completion variance is fixed. Okay, we've had an actual cost variance, but okay, that's done. We're not going to have a problem again, so it's fixed through completion. This is the most common. You've gone over your costing, you've slapped a lot of hands, you've done corrective change orders, you've done some preventative changes, or whatever you need to do to ensure that you don't have these overruns again. Maybe you went back to your risk register now and you have added in some contingency reserves to be able to fund it so it doesn't happen again maybe. But anyway, the most common thing is to just continue on with the project, accept the overrun, and go on. And given that, if nothing else changes, you're going to use your budgeted rate estimate at completion. Where am I going to be at the end, knowing I spent $50 more, but if I'm on target the rest of the way, where am I going to be? That's what this is all about. And it's kind of verified by this formula you need to know. The estimate at completion for budgeted rate is your actual cost you spent to date, which happens to be an overrun, plus the balance at completion, which happens to be $1,000, minus the earned value to date. Okay? That is your metric right there. And over here, we're going to actually show you how that works. But let's not confuse all that right now. Just look at the concept, and then we'll look at the actual calculation later. So actual cost plus the balance at completion minus the earned value to date, that's where you think you're going to be at the end of the job, all other things being equal. Now, your current cost performance index, given that, is the current actual cost variation, the rate of the variation. If it remains constant through completion, you'll use this formula. The estimate at completion is your balance at completion, 1,000, divided by your current cost performance index. So now you're trending, your index, performance index, you're trending, and we're talking back here about your performance indices that we went through, your CPIs and SPIs and TCPIs. If we continue at that rate, we will have an estimate at completion of X amount. Okay? Now, there's another variable here, or another option, and that's you can take the current cost performance index and your current schedule performance index. You can use those in a formula to determine where you're going to be at the end of the job. So these are used, CPI and SPI are used when the schedule variance rate will also remain through completion. Now this is very common too. You're going to have variations in your costing as you go along. Likely you're not going to be exact right on. Your schedule is going to have slips, and you're going to have improvements and delays, and it's going to go on. But if you think that the current rate of schedule variation and the current rate of cost variation will remain the same from this point on, you can use this formula where you can estimate where you're going to be at the end of the job. Estimate at completion is your actual cost to date, and here we have it up here. Same thing here. You're going to take this budgeted rate, which says your AC is going to you're going to continue fixed through the end of the job. So here's your formula: BAC minus AC plus AC right there, divided by this composite of performance indices, your cost performance index and your schedule performance index. You divide that out, and you will come up with a number here that is your estimate at the end. So 3 different calculations depending on how you want to look at it, and you can use all of these and use all of these in your forecasting to help you determine where you're going to be at the end. And these all assume now that things are going to continue at the same rate of degradation or the same rate of improvement as you have today. If they just continue on, at the end of the job you're going to be at a certain number, and that's what these give you. And we'll see actual numbers in the next slide. Now under the bar here is the one that's more egregious. This is when we don't know what's going on. So the estimate to complete, you say, okay, at completion will be there if we keep going, but we don't know what we're going to do, so what does it take to complete this job? Because we're out of whack. These indices up above aren't going to help us anymore because they're so bad maybe. So what do we need to do? Where could we be at the end? How can we do it? So that's this estimate to complete, a different purpose. This is used when your balance at completion, your $1,000, just say that's invalid. We're never going to achieve it at this rate. So let's do something different. Let's rethink this. So to do that, you do your actual cost to date because you've spent them. They're real money. It's spent. It's gone. So now you do a bottom-up estimate to complete for all your activities that yet remain. You re-estimate them all. You use all them plus your actuals, and that now, in this point in time, is what you expect to spend at the end. Okay, now again, if you do that, you're still going to have to keep things under control, or you're going to be in the same situation where you're going to do your forecasting, and you may have to do it again. We blew that, and we have to do it again. But that's what the estimate to complete is. That's when you give up trying to control your original forecast, and you say, well, let's just start up, take what we've done to date, re-estimate what it's going to take to complete, and then that is our balance of completion or estimate to complete. Okay, that's really not too bad yet, so let's look at the actual numbers, and we'll give you a breather on this one, and we'll come back and talk about the actual numbers and how these things flesh out and what they mean. Okay, here's our next slide where we're going to actually perform the calculations with the real numbers based on, from our scenario, which again are down at the lower right here. So let's go through this. Actually, it says up here, here's where things get less straightforward. That would have been applied to the prior slide too, and basically because of the options you have here. But let's look at these. So when you still think you can achieve your budget at completion, even given the variances you had to date, you can use these formulas. So at the budgeted rate, for the current actual cost variance, if you think that's it and it's just going to remain constant through the end of the job, here's your calculation. Your estimate at completion is your $800 you've already spent plus your $1,000 budget minus the earned value that you've already expended. So the number here is $1,175 or an 18% budget overrun if everything else is equal and you run the project out to end and you don't have any more variances. That'll be your budget at the end. So now you know if you can control to your baseline now, even with the overrun, if you can keep things intact and not have more overruns, either cost or schedule, that will actually be your budget at the end, $1,175 or an 18% overrun. And on a large job, 18% is not a good thing. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. It's all relative to your tolerance of your company, how much they're willing to accept as far as overruns and things. But anyway, that's how this calculates out in our little scenario. Now, if we use our current cost performance index, I don't know, you might want to call that a burn rate, maybe, although that's not an official term at all. That's just me. So anyway, but it's your performance index. So it's your current actual cost variance rate. If that remains through the rate, it's your estimate at completion is $1,000, your budget, divided by your cost performance index, which was 7.78. So now, just based on that, it's going to be $1,280, okay, or a 28% budget overrun. Quite a difference. But we're looking at this now. If the rate continues this way, meaning we're going to continue to have overruns at the same level that we did to get here in the first place, then we're going to be at $1,280 at the end. And the third option, and you should use all three of these, so you can it gives you more informed information to help you control your budget. We're going to use the CPI and our schedule, quote unquote burn rate. So here we go. We've already spent $800. So it's 1,000 minus 625, which is the same as up here, our budgeted rate. However, this time we're going to divide it by not our CPI, but the product of the CPI times the SPI. And you do that down here, and now all of a sudden, if we continue to miss the mark on cost, as we have, and if we continue to miss the mark on schedule, as we have on that last day anyway, we're going to end up in the end having spent $1,376 or 38% budget overrun. That's how we use, at least to this point here, earned value management to help us forecast, based on past performance, where we're going to be in the future. So now you have three different numbers, which result in an 18%, 28%, 38% overrun. So what you need to do is you really want this one up here. You say, we've messed up to date, we're not going to do it again, we're going to accept where we are. I mean, you have to, you spent the money. So either we save money in the future where we can bring that 18% down and get it back in line so we meet our $1,000 budget, and that's a very achievable thing in some respects that you may be able to do, get cheaper labor, swap out some staff if that's what it takes, buy a less expensive third-party product maybe for you. There's ways of saving money if possible, and that could help you bring your budget back down to where it should be. And that's the value of these metrics. Now down here, you say, okay, if we continue to have the similar kind of problem we did with cost, where we spent more than we should have, we will assume we're going to be 28% over. So let's not have this happen, and you have to work with your staff, make sure they don't spend more than they should have. And likewise, if you consider both your cost deficiency and not getting things done on time, if those continue at the same rate they were up to this point, you're going to be way over budget. So these things are a great help aid in you looking at your project, finding issues, and helping you find solutions. They don't directly help you find solutions, but you know at least what you need to look at the most. That's the most egregious here. So now the other flip side of this, Let's say, this was a great big number. Let's say these were $1 million instead of thousands. You're going to be 13 million, let's say, over. Bad news. So you say, that's just totally, totally unacceptable. We got to stop what we're doing. So you go back down here and you say, okay, we spent, $800,000. And you go back to everything else that has not yet been accomplished. You add all those up. So right now, if we started fresh today with CPI and SPI of 1, and we were able to do that throughout the end, given whatever's remaining to be done, those costs and schedules, plus what we've already spent, that now is your new, going to end up being your new budget of completion. And you do that, okay, what is the estimate to complete now? So another option for you if it's totally unachievable to be able to bring it back to where it should have been in the beginning. So those are the concepts here with EAC and ETC. And now one final screen here. Actually, there's two final screens. We're going to take a break again because your mind is probably bent now with this, as is mine. So we're going to take a short break and come back and talk about another very significant indicator, which is your to complete performance index. Okay, now we're going to look at another performance indicator, which is a great value, and it's called the to complete performance index, TCPI. Again, either the abbreviation or the full word. You might see those. So this is a measure of the cost performance efficiency that is required to meet an objective in the end, to meet the final project cost. And is more or less sort of like a burn rate kind of thing, and we'll see this right here. The TCPI is your balance at completion minus the earned value to date, which may or may not be the value of the actual work that should have been done or the cost that should have been spent, is the earned value against those, positive or negatively against it, divided by the balance to complete at the end, or balance at completion minus the actual cost. And this gives you, it's the work remaining, balance at completion minus EV is the work remaining, balance at completion minus the actual cost, that is the pure funds remaining from your budget. You divide those out and you get a number. And what that means in layman's terms or management terms is that, hey, this is the work we have to complete for every dollar we spend. So if it's 1, that means good. For every dollar we spend, we have to contribute $1 worth of work. In our case, though, because we're behind both in cost and schedule, it calculates out to be, given our numbers here, we don't have to go through this in detail, but you plug the numbers in the formula, you come up with a 1.88. What does that mean? Well, first, anything over 1.1 indicates a problem. You better start looking at what's going on, because in general, it means that I need to contribute, me and my staff, whoever this is, I have to provide 1.88 times the value of schedule and cost value that I would have normally had to schedule or provide for $1 worth of work. So you have to do almost twice the effort to provide $1 worth of work because you're behind in order to achieve your original budget. Okay, that's why this is a very important indicator, because this is the indicator that may finally say it may finally say, okay, I give up, I can't do it, let's re-baseline it. That's where the value of that indicator. So this is very bad. This means that if I'm building this thing, on that last day, I got to, provide a 1.88 worth of value for $1 that I should have. So it's not a good thing. So anything over 1.1 when you're talking TCPI is not a good thing. Now remember, your CPIs and your SPIs, cost and schedule performance indicators, they start to get bad things when they go below 1. Okay, now this is a different concept, this particular metric here. This is where, if it's over 1, and then particularly worse than 1.1, you're in trouble, and you may start to you really need to get things under control, or you may get into the situation, if it gets bad enough, you just got to give up and re-baseline, because you'll never achieve the budget you proposed in the beginning. Of course, to do that, you got to talk to your stakeholders. You got to bear it all. So here's the reasons why we got to let's start over, so we have an achievable budget in the end and schedule in the end. Now, even if it's bad like this, and if you decide not to re-baseline, in the end, you're just going to end up way over budget, way over schedule, and is the client going to be happy? Probably not. Will they receive the goods they wanted? Yeah, they will. There may be quality stuff, what they want, but they're going to have spent more money and it's going to be late, they're going to be upset. It would be better generally that you work with your stakeholders and you say, here's the problem, let's get this on so that we can, achieve a reasonable schedule in the end and cost in the end. And that also affects your project staff. They know that they aren't working, like, why are we even doing this? It's embarrassing. Their motivation goes down when they're in a situation like that they can't achieve. Okay, so you re-baseline it. everything's afresh, at least from your staff's point of view, your project team, and they probably would be more willing then to get on it and not let this happen again. So that's why this is a very important index, and I hope you see the reasoning why you should really consider, if you don't already, using earned value management in your project. It's very incredibly valuable, powerful stuff, okay? And that is earned value management. Now, let me say one other thing. Let me go back here to look at the formula here. In the PMP exam, like let's take this one, it looks a little more complicated. It really isn't once you understand it, but let's just look at it. In the quiz questions in the exam, they may give you components of this, and you know how x plus 2 equal 3. Well, what is x? Well, you move the 2 over, so it's 3 minus 2, so x equals 1. They can give you any of these components and expect you to be able to manipulate these formulas like that so that you can get the answer you want. They won't always be like this necessarily. They may give you, the EAC, at the end. They may give you this number over here. Okay, where is it? $1,376. This is your budget overrun, and your CPI is this, you've spent this much, and your earned value is this. What is the SPI? You may need to calculate that. So you need to know these formulas backwards and forwards. They're the same formula, but you need to know a little bit about basic algebra to move these things around. Again, the very simplistic example is x plus 2 equal 3. So you say move the 2 over the minus 2 over there, so now it's 3, minus 2 equals 1, so x is 1, x plus 2 equal 3, or 1 plus 2 equal 3. So you're going to have to be able to be prepared that they're not going to give you exactly these, but some combination of metrics that you need to calculate out. So keep that in mind. So that then, given all that, here we are, we're done with that piece of it. So we're going to come back here now in a minute, give your mind a rest, and do come back because it's not all that bad. This is the worst of it as far as formulas go for PMP and in the PMBOK in their methodology. So we're going to come back and talk a bit about performance reviews, easier stuff, and then we'll end the day with this. So we'll be back in a minute. Okay, now that we've settled down, I hope you've gathered your composure after that actually pretty deep dive into earned value management concepts and formulas and calculations and so on. The more you review that, the more you think about why those things are the way they are. Read your PMBOK again. It has more detail, although in many respects, well, not many maybe, but in some respects, what you've seen here is even a better clarification, because it's, I think, maybe a more concise presentation than you actually get when you read this chapter in the PMBOK. And that, I'm just not flapping my hat there, but I think this will help you a little better than looking at some of the the formulas and the way they present it in the PMBOK. It's a little bit confusing, at least in my mind, so I hope this helps you sort it out. But you need to do this in combination. Bounce it off the PMBOK, see where I'm talking about, and it will help you clarify this. This is really important stuff. It'll really be, it's going to be emphasized to some degree in your PMP exam, but again, use it if you can in your professional career. Try to fold it in somehow, at least yourself, and it will help you, determine whether your project is in trouble or not. So here's a few much easier calculations here. Performance reviews. Okay, we have performance indexes and all these. We know why the TCPI is so critically helpful, because that tells you whether you got you're way in trouble or not overall, because it considers all the metrics. But here we go. Performance reviews. So variance analysis. You know your variances. So your variance analysis. So variance at completion, your balance minus your EAC. We already know how to calculate that. So from our example, our balance at completion was 1,000, and in one of our, you can do this on any of them, but one of them, let's just pick the third one, which is the most egregious one, 1,000 minus 1,346, you're going to have a variance of your cost of $376, or basically a $376 overrun at the end, which you could report as you're reporting performance to the proper parties during your project. Trend analysis, that's performance over time, which is the kind of things we all looked at here. You can plot all this stuff. And earned value performance, here's where you can compare the performance measurement baseline, your approved cost baseline, with the actual schedule and your cost performance. And if you don't use earned value management, what you would use then instead, which is what most people do who don't even care to use, or don't even know what it is, earned value management, they say your cost baseline, $1,000, minus the actual cost, $800, is $200 earned performance at that point. And that doesn't really give you a lot of valuable information as far as being able to control your project, because that's what we're talking about, controlling our costs. So that's, maybe the most common thing used on most projects. But I hope you can see by now the value and the power of using earned value management. If you can possibly do it and you actually get skilled in it, you'll see the great benefits to that, to you, your project, your stakeholders, and toward ultimately your project success. To wrap up tools and techniques with controlling costs, again, your project management software can help you if it's that type of software and if it's capable to do it, do these financial forecasts for you and give you your graphical trends and so on. And maybe you need to resort to a spreadsheet to do it, which is what I actually did to develop my little scenario. I had a spreadsheet with the formulas in the background. You plug in the actuals, it calculates it out. It's great. But that has its limits as far as flexibility and complexity with your project. So you'd rather have software that's capable of doing that and has dedicated modules per se to help you with that. And of course, a big component of controlling costs is controlling your reserves analysis that you've set aside for known and unknown risk events. Determine your current needs when you control your costs based on where you are and what you've spent so far as your reserves are concerned. So the output of all this stuff, after we've done all this mathematical exercising and gymnastics, we can report now work performance information. So this is actually now valuable information. It's not just data. It just doesn't say your CPI is this or that. There's a reason now why we can use the CPI to form an intelligent statement to our stakeholders. And you use that with your variances, your performance indexes, your to complete performance index, and your variances at completion. You got to watch out though. CPIs and SPIs are okay. You can say, oh, we're trending down, we're going to get it into shape, this. But and those may not look that bad, but if you did a TCPI, given those same CPIs and SPIs, it could be very bad, and you know that, but don't tell that to your stakeholder just yet until you're able to really determine whether you can bring things back into line or not. So you got to be careful with these numbers. I mean, they're powerful to you, but they could be very powerful negatively if they get into the wrong hands at the wrong time. So be careful how you use these numbers. Outputs then are the pure cost forecasts, your estimate at completion, that you can communicate to stakeholders. I mean, that's just a regular real number. It doesn't say how, at that point in time, that's your estimate complete. Your TCPI would say if I complete at this rate, it's going to be way worse than that. Hold off on that for a little bit. But you can communicate some of these to your stakeholders. Your WBS components, again, you can get down to that level and forecast against them themselves because they could have variance because you're talking pieces of it now. They could have very different CPIs and SPIs for components and work packages and control accounts than the overall budget, which is good because now you can deal with the ones that are the most problem. I mean, you can get down to really targeting something that you desperately need to fix to the benefit of everything. So that's why you look at that level. Of course, change requests are going to be output for you to make corrective and preventative actions to try to bring things back into line. Primarily here we're talking about cost, but of course Schedule 2, back in time management. Your PM plan, if in fact you do say, okay, I need now an estimate to complete, your rebaseline, you're going to have to redo your cost baseline. That's a PM plan update. You may have to change your cost management plan to some degree if you're going to change the way you use your metrics, whatever it might take. Project documents, of course, your actual cost estimates and basis of estimates now may change as you see the problems that exist. Well, let's change this and do that, and modify this, tweak this, improve that, whatever it takes. Project documents are updated. And the causes, here's where you get to your organizational assets that can be of value to new projects, new project managers, or yourself on a new project later. What causes variances amongst your team or amongst the external environmental factors, your suppliers, whatever. What is the problem? Why did this cause this? How, and then lessons learned and things like that are here. Even though it doesn't say it, the lessons learned. How can I avoid this in the future? What did I do to correct it? That's your causes of variance, what corrective action you took and why. Financial databases too may have to be updated because of the way you're spending money may have to be adjusted. And here are lessons, they are here, lessons learned, project cost control lessons learned. All valuable stuff for new projects if you do this. Very powerful stuff here. And if you've never thought about it before, please think about it now and how you can integrate this into your own project environments. So wow, that was fun, wasn't it? So here's project costs. We're done. We now have an approved budget, cost baseline, and we have some very powerful tools in helping us manage costs as well as some of the schedule components too. So we're off and running. Now the last couple of modules we're going to look at are the procurement management modules. We're going to look at first we're going to plan for a procurement because it's most likely we'll have to buy something for our project. It won't be 100% in-house. And all the various commitment purchasing vehicles that there are out there, and there are quite a few of them. And here's another one that is not as bad as formulas, but these may actually confuse your mind as the myriad of options you have to select to apply to the appropriate type of procurement for whatever it is you may need. We'll see those in the next modules, and then actually conduct procurements. How do we actually go out and buy stuff? And then after that, we'll have our last module, 26. What we'll do there is we'll control our procurements and finally close out procurements so that we can close out the phase or the project. Because closing procurements and closing the phase or project are the only two closing process group processes. So we'll see you in module 25.